Forgotten 80s tasks that took forever. Ever hear folks call the 80s simpler times? Makes you chuckle, right? Because while maybe less complicated, life sure demanded more patience. Remember wrestling with a manual car window during a surprise shower? Or the sheer dedication it took to record a killer mixtape off the radio? These everyday things were work, but we didn't complain. Join us as we dive into those time-sucking tasks the 80s made us master. We're revisiting the forgotten habits and everyday hassles of the world before everything went digital. Looking back, some of that normal stuff feels downright bizarre now. Let's get started. The cassette tape shuffle. The 80s gave us some killer music, didn't it? It was also a time of musical transition. By 83 or so, those bulky 8-track tapes were fading fast. Compact discs were the shiny new future, but wow, were they expensive? CDs and players cost a pretty penny, so they weren't exactly standard issue yet. Plenty of us still spun vinyl, but if one format truly defined the decade's sound for the average person, it was the cassette tape. Those little plastic rectangles were pure magic, small enough to stash anywhere, tough enough to survive being tossed on the dashboard, and perfect for taking your tunes on the road. Cassettes were our constant companions, blasting from boomboxes on the corner, playing in the car stereo, or tucked into a Walkman for a private soundtrack. But finding that one song? It was an adventure. Side A or side B? Fast forward, rewind, stop, play, darn. Too far? And the ultimate tragedy, the tape getting hopelessly tangled in the player. Every music fan knew the fix, though grab the nearest pencil, carefully insert it into the spool, and patiently twist that ribbon back into place. Instant track access today feels like cheating. Of course, getting clear audio wasn't the only reception challenge we faced back then in our living rooms. Firing up the Commodore. If you were tapping away on a computer back in the 80s, particularly the beloved Commodore 64, you learned early on that gaming came with a healthy dose of waiting. It wasn't like today where you just poke an icon and boom, you're in. Oh no, launching a game was practically a ceremony. Power on, get that bright blue screen with the blinking cursor staring back at you. Then, the incantation, carefully typing load star, 8, one hit that enter key. And you waited, maybe crossed your fingers. If the computer god smiled and gave you that sweet ready prompt, you weren't done yet. Type run, hit enter again. And then, yep, more waiting. No fancy graphics showing progress, just hope and maybe the whirring of the disk drive. Make one typo in that command. Sorry, Charlie, start the whole ritual over. Kids today would probably short-circuit just thinking about it. But for us, it was just how it was. And when that game finally loaded, man, that victory felt earned. That kind of patience extended beyond just computers. Even our music required a different kind of manual effort. Antenna acrobatics. Long before cable snaked its way into every neighborhood, and light years before streaming was even a concept, watching TV meant dealing with the antenna. Whether you had the classic rabbit ears sitting precariously on top of the set or a larger metal contraption bolted to your roof, getting a decent picture was often a challenge. Reception could be finicky, to say the least. If the screen turned into a blizzard of static, it became an all-hands-on-deck situation. Someone, usually the youngest, had to carefully adjust the rabbit ears a little left, a little higher, maybe point one towards the window. Sometimes, in moments of true desperation, out came the aluminum foil, carefully wrapped around the tips in a folk-tech attempt to boost the signal. It felt silly, but hey, sometimes it worked. If you were lucky enough to have a rooftop antenna, reception was generally better, but adjusting that often involved a somewhat perilous climb onto the roof. A few fancy setups had motorized rotators you could adjust with a dial indoors, but that was living large. Then cable arrived, promising perfect picture for a monthly fee, of course. Suddenly, antenna adjustments became a nostalgic memory, much like the way we used to connect with people over the phone required its own kind of deliberate action. Rotary phone realities. For many of us growing up before the digital floodgates opened, the landline phone wasn't just useful, it was essential. Long before cell phones tucked into every pocket, we actually had to remember phone numbers, or at least the important ones. Family, your best friend, the local pizza joint, those were committed to memory. For less frequent calls, you had that little spiral-bound address book, probably with half the entries crossed out and rewritten, stashed near the phone. And for everything else, the mighty phone book. That thick, yellow-page tome listed practically everyone and every business in town. Finding a number meant flipping through page after page, scanning tiny print. No quick searches here. Then came the dialing itself, especially with a rotary phone. You'd stick your finger in the hole, pull the dial all the way around to the stop, let it whir back, repeat for every single digit. Make a mistake halfway through? Hang up, take a breath, and start the whole sequence over. Trying to win a radio call-in contest with a rotary was a fool's errand against the lightning speed of push-button dialing. But those old phones, they were practically indestructible. Connecting with people took time, and so did consuming our entertainment, especially when everyone watched together. Appointment television. It seems almost quaint now, but there was a time when watching television was a shared event, everyone tuning in at the exact same moment to see the same show unfold live. This was the era before DVRs let us spend time, before streaming services offered endless choices, even before VCRs were commonplace enough for everyone to record things. If your favorite sitcom or drama was on Tuesday at 9 p.m., you parked yourself in front of the tube at 9 p.m. Period. No showing up late, no hitting pause for a snack, no rewinding if you missed a crucial line. You were locked in. And then there were the commercials. You couldn't skip them, couldn't fast forward. You just watched them. Some were iconic, their jingles burrowing into our brains forever. But let's be honest, the commercials served another vital purpose: the strategic break. The second those ads started, it was a mad dash to the bathroom, to the kitchen, trying to complete your mission before the show snapped back on. In a house with limited facilities, this could become a competitive sport. Soon enough, though, technology arrived that gave us a bit more control over when we watched our shows and movies. Tag a friend who would totally remember these 80s time wasters. The video store quest. VCRs started trickling out in the 70s, but it was really the mid-1980s when they became a fixture in seemingly every living room. Suddenly, movie night wasn't restricted to whatever the networks decided to air or a trip to the multiplex. You could actually rent a movie and watch it on your schedule. The movie industry initially freaked out, worried this would kill theaters, but for us regular folks, it was revolutionary. Of course, renting wasn't quite the seamless experience of browsing Netflix today. It meant a pilgrimage to the local video rental store, which was an experience in itself. You'd spend ages wandering the aisles, physically picking up those chunky VHS boxes, reading the often dramatic summaries on the back, debating choices with family or friends. Have you seen this one? Is it scary? It was a whole social ritual, especially on a Friday or Saturday night. And once you finally made your selection, your responsibility wasn't over. You had to remember to rewind the tape before returning it. Hence those ubiquitous stickers: be kind, rewind. Forget, and you might face a small fine, adding insult to the injury of potential late fees if you missed the return deadline. While VCRs brought movies home, another piece of noisy technology was busy printing things out in homes and offices. The Dot Matrix Symphony. If you spent any time near a computer or even a cash register in the 80s or early 90s, you're familiar with the soundtrack, that high-pitched, grinding, zipping noise of a dot matrix printer hard at work. Maybe you had one at home connected to your Apple IIE, or used one in the school computer lab, or just got receipts printed on that unique paper. It was everywhere. These printers used continuous sheets of paper with perforated holes running down both sides, which engaged with sprockets to feed the paper through tractor feed, they called it. Printing anything involved that unmistakable mechanical racket filling the room. And when the printing was done, there was one last crucial and strangely satisfying step: carefully tearing off those hole-punched strips along the edges. It felt like a necessary part of the process, cleaning up the document. But did we just toss those strips? Heck no. Admit it, you probably folded them into little zigzagging accordions, or rolled them into tiny caterpillars, or just fiddled with them endlessly. Surely I wasn't the only one doing that. That mechanical sound was distinct, much like the whirring and clicking of another communication device that relied on tape. Answering machine antics. Back in the pre-voicemail dark ages of the 1980s, if you weren't physically present to answer the phone, your only hope of not missing out was the trusty answering machine. These little boxes, usually running on mini or standard cassette tapes, became household staples. But they weren't just functional. Setting up your outgoing greeting was a form of self-expression. Would you be brief and businesslike? Please leave a message after the beep. Or would you inject some personality, a bad joke, maybe some background music? If you were going on vacation, you might record a special message letting callers know, especially crucial if people needed to reach you for work. As handy as they were, they had their frustrations. Most kicked in after 4 or 5 rings, so you'd patiently wait, listen to the entire greeting, only to sometimes be met with the dreaded electronic voice saying, "Memory full. Please call again later." Arc. Listening back was also a linear affair. No skipping bad messages. You had to listen through or try to fast forward and guess where the next message began. And then, you had to manually rewind the tape to erase old messages and make room for new ones. Quite the chore. Dealing with limited tape storage was one challenge, but managing data on early computer disks presented its own set of hurdles. The floppy disk shuffle. If you ever relied on those classic 5 1/4-inch floppy disks for computer storage back in the day, you learned one thing fast. You needed a lot of them. These thin, genuinely floppy squares were how we loaded software and saved our precious documents, but their storage capacity was laughably tiny by modern measures. A standard double-sided, double-density disk held about 360 kilobytes. That's barely enough space for a single decent quality photo today. If you splurge for the high-density versions later on, you got a comparatively massive 1.2 megabytes, which still filled up incredibly quickly. This limitation meant saving anything complex was a multi-disk affair. Installing a big program might require swapping disks in and out multiple times. Saving your own work often meant spreading files across several labeled floppies. Organization wasn't just helpful, it was mandatory, with handwritten labels being your only guide. And these disks were delicate. A scratch from dust, getting bent in a backpack, even being near a telephone receiver's magnet could scramble your data instantly. Compared to today's terabyte drives and cloud storage, it was digital life on hard mode. Just like navigating file systems required care, navigating the actual roads demanded a different, very physical, tool. What's one time-consuming task from the 80s that you remember struggling with the most? Mastering the roadmap. Before our phones started politely telling us exactly when and where to turn, navigating unfamiliar territory involved a bit more engagement. You either winged it, relying on street signs and landmarks, or you unfolded a physical roadmap. If you chose the map route, trying to consult it while driving solo was a recipe for disaster. By the time you got that big sheet unfolded, it was probably obscuring your view of the speedometer, maybe even half the windshield. Following your progress in real time was tricky, so you often had to pull over or memorize chunks of the route. Okay, take Highway 10 for 5 miles, then look for the exit for Elm Street. Many of us resorted to scribbling down simplified turn-by-turn directions on a scrap of paper beforehand. The passenger often became the official navigator, tasked with map-reading duties. And perhaps the most universally frustrating part? Trying to fold the map back up correctly along its original creases. It felt like wrestling an octopus, often ending with a crumpled mess stuffed haphazardly into the glove compartment. GPS definitely lowered the blood pressure on road trips. Those maps were just one example of the physical objects we relied on heavily before everything went digital, especially when it came to our entertainment collections. The physical media parade. Looking back, The evolution of how we watched movies and listened to music at home is just wild. If you wanted a movie in the early days, you might have invested in beta tapes, remember those? Only to see VHS swoop in and completely dominate the market. Then there was the brief, fascinating era of the Laserdisc, those giant, silvery discs that offered better quality but never quite hit the mainstream. A lot of folks skipped that pricey format altogether and waited for the next big thing, the digital versatile disc or DVD. Building these collections wasn't just about entertainment. It was a serious investment. We spent good money on tapes and discs, not to mention the dedicated racks, shelves, and towering cabinets needed to organize them all. And how many of us bought the exact same movie multiple times? You got your favorite action flick on VHS, then upgraded to the sharper DVD version years later, and maybe even shelled out again for the high-definition Blu-ray. It felt like a never-ending cycle of repurchasing. Now, streaming offers almost everything instantly, making those shelves of plastic seem almost archaic. Still hard to toss those nostalgic VHS tapes though, even if the scratch-prone DVDs went first. While home media evolved, taking our music on the go presented its own set of power challenges. Powering the boombox. These days, keeping our gadgets juiced up is usually as simple as plugging in a USB cable for a while. Rechargeable lithium-ion batteries are miracles of convenience. But back in the glorious era of the boombox, taking your music truly portable meant stocking up on batteries, specifically those big, heavy D cells. Boomboxes were the undisputed kings of portable sound in the 80s and early 90s, letting us blast cassette tapes or radio stations wherever we gathered. But man, were they power-hungry beasts. Depending on the size and features, your boombox might demand 6, 8, or even a whopping 10D batteries. And those things weren't cheap. Plus, they seemed to drain incredibly fast, especially if you were hitting rewind and fast forward a lot trying to find songs or make mixtapes. Running out of juice mid-song was a party foul. And the frustration if you accidentally bought C batteries instead of D? Ugh, you'd better hope the corner store was still open. We must have spent a small fortune feeding those things, and carrying spares just added to the already substantial weight. Today's featherlight Bluetooth speakers make those battery burdens seem prehistoric. Keeping those portable tunes playing required constant battery management, just like keeping track of time itself involved more manual intervention back then. What's one thing you used to do in the 80s that today's kids would never understand? The watch winder's ritual. Today, if someone needs the time, they almost reflexively glance at their phone screen. Wristwatches certainly still exist, but for many, they're more about style than strict necessity. But go back a few decades, and having a reliable watch strapped to your wrist was absolutely crucial for navigating the day. Some of us even remember owning wind-up watches, marvelous little mechanical devices that didn't need batteries, but required a daily ritual. You had to remember to gently win the crown every morning or evening to keep it ticking. Forgetting meant your watch would simply stop. And even battery-powered watches required maintenance. If yours had a date window, it often didn't account for months shorter than 31 days, meaning you had to manually advance the date on the 1st of March, May, July, October, and December. And twice a year? Time for the daylight saving time adjustment forward in spring, back in fall. But how did we ensure our watches were accurate? No atomic clock signals syncing automatically. We dialed the phone number for the local time service. At the tone, the time will be. And carefully set not just our wristwatch, but usually the bedside alarm clock and the kitchen clock too. Manually adjusting time was one thing. Manually curating hours of music required a whole different level of dedication. Crafting the perfect mixtape. When someone today talks about making a mixtape for their friend, they usually mean dragging some digital files into a playlist quick, easy, done in minutes. And that's cool, but forgive us old-timers for chuckling a bit. Because making an actual mixtape on a cassette back in the 80s, that wasn't just selecting songs. It was an art form, a test of patience, timing, and sometimes sheer luck. Often, the best way to get songs you didn't own was recording them off the radio. This meant hours spent hovering near the stereo or boombox, cassette deck ready, finger poised over the record button, waiting for that killer track to finally play. When it started, you had to punch record immediately, praying the DJ wouldn't start yakking over the intro or, worse, the fade out. Mess up the timing or get DJ chatter. Too bad. Try again tomorrow, maybe? You repeated this meticulous process, song by painstaking song, until you'd filled 60 or 90 minutes with your hand-picked gems. It was slow, often frustrating, but the sheer effort involved made gifting or receiving a mixtape feel incredibly personal and special. That kind of careful attention was sometimes forgotten in other areas, leading to different kinds of 80s frustrations, like dealing with your car. The dead battery blues. Modern cars are packed with helpful features: headlights that turn off automatically, warning chimes if you leave them on, battery saver modes. It's hard to accidentally drain your battery these days. But cast your mind back to the average car in the 1980s. Forgetting to switch off your headlights after parking was an incredibly common and deeply frustrating mistake. You'd come out in the morning, maybe running late for work or school, turn the key, and instead of the engine roaring to life, you'd hear that sickening, slow click, 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 dead battery. Maybe you got home exhausted and just forgot, or perhaps you lingered a little too long at a scenic viewpoint with the radio playing. Either way, the result was the same. You weren't going anywhere easily. Your options were limited. Find a kind soul with jumper cables, and hope one of you knew how to connect them correctly. Call for an expensive tow truck, or, if you had a manual transmission and some strong friends, or a convenient hill, attempt a push start. It was a rite of passage almost everyone endured at least once. Just as finding a jump start could be frantic, finding the right thing on TV could sometimes feel like a race against time. What's something from the 80s you still refuse to give up, even with modern alternatives? Channel surfing purgatory. Finding something to watch now involves scrolling through a slick on-screen guide, or just telling your remote what you want. Easy peasy. But remember the early days of cable television? Finding a specific channel, like the all-important MTV, often felt like navigating a maze blindfolded. There was no interactive guide, no search bar. You had that chunky cable box, often connected by a thick wire, with numbered buttons. Finding channel 28 meant clicking up, or maybe punching in 2 then 8. And if something huge was about to premiere, say, a blockbuster music video like Michael Jackson's Thriller, the pressure was intense. You had to be on the right channel at the right moment. If you couldn't remember if MTV was channel 28 or 32, you'd be frantically clicking, hoping you didn't overshoot it and land on the home shopping network while history was being made elsewhere. Go past it. Frantically click back down, praying you hadn't missed the opening seconds. It was high-stakes viewing compared to today's easily navigable, time-shifted world. That feeling of manual control, or lack thereof, extended to features inside our cars too. The manual window workout. See a few raindrops starting to fall while you're driving today? Push a button. Windows sealed. Simple. But back when power windows were often an optional extra, maybe only on fancy cars, sealing your car against a sudden downpour required physical exertion. You'd be cruising along, maybe with the radio up, windows down, enjoying the breeze, and then the sky opens up. Instant panic. You'd grab that window crank handle and start spinning it like your life depended on it, trying desperately to close the gap before the upholstery, and you got drenched. If you had passengers, it was every person for themselves, frantically cranking their own window. Getting caught at a traffic light during a cloudburst was the worst. No effortless electric motors here, just pure arm power and speed. And while we're on the subject of 80s car interiors, who remembers the way back of the station wagon? That glorious, often rear-facing, seatbelt optional zone where kids just tumbled in? Simpler times, maybe, but definitely different safety standards. Kids today miss the window crank cardio. That reliance on physical action extended to how we connected with people, often requiring us to stay put. The waiting game by the phone. Before the instant gratification of texting, DMs, and knowing exactly when someone saw your message, expecting a phone call was an exercise in pure, unadulterated waiting. If you made plans, if you had a crush who might call, if a friend promised to phone back, you had to physically position yourself within earshot of the landline phone and wait. There was no taking the call with you to another room or outside. You were tethered. Leaving the vicinity for even a quick bathroom break felt risky. What if that was the exact moment they called? And the special kind of torture that was the busy signal. If you called them and heard that rapid beep beep beep, you had absolutely no idea when they might hang up. Could be 2 minutes, could be an hour. No call waiting to barge in, no voicemail to leave a quick message, unless they had splurged on an answering machine, which wasn't universal. Think of the collective hours teens spent in the 80s just staring at the phone, occasionally picking it up to check for a dial tone, hoping, waiting. Patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a necessity. All this waiting and juggling separate communication methods highlights just how many individual tools we needed before technology bundled everything together. Life before the smartphone. It's genuinely staggering to consider how many individual items we used to routinely carry or rely on that have now been completely absorbed into that single, sleek device in our pocket, the smartphone. Today, one gadget is our phone, clock, map, notepad, music player, address book, calculator, checkbook, mobile banking app, newspaper, camera, and video recorder, all rolled into one. But back in the 80s, getting through the day often meant juggling a whole collection of separate tools. You needed coins for a payphone if you were out and about. A wristwatch was essential for telling time. A folded paper map lived in the glove compartment for navigation. A small notebook and pen were for jotting things down. It sounds exhausting now, but back then, that collection of single-purpose items was just life. Thinking back on all these time-consuming tasks really makes you appreciate the conveniences we have today, doesn't it? Managing pre-digital photography and photo albums. While the article touches on physical media like VHS, it misses the entire time-consuming ritual surrounding personal photography before digital cameras and smartphones. In the 80s, capturing memories meant buying rolls of film, typically offering only 24 or 36 exposures. Each shot was a commitment. You couldn't preview it, delete mistakes, or instantly share it. Careful consideration was needed for each picture, knowing film and development weren't free. Once you finished a precious roll, the real patience test began. You'd take the canister to a drugstore or photo lab, then wait often for several days, sometimes up to a week for the film to be developed. There was always a sense of anticipation mixed with anxiety. Would the pictures turn out? Did anyone blink? Finally, you'd pick up an envelope containing your glossy prints, often with mandatory duplicates, and the negatives. Then came the task of sorting through them, discarding the blurry or badly composed ones, and meticulously organizing the keepers into physical photo albums. This often involved carefully sliding photos behind plastic sheets or using adhesive corners, sometimes adding handwritten captions. Compared to today's instant digital gratification and cloud storage, 80s photography required significant time, money, and manual effort from capture to curation. Looking back, it's amazing how much has changed since the 80s. Technology has made life easier, but at the time, we didn't question the effort it took to do everyday tasks. Change is constant, and what seems advanced today may be outdated tomorrow. We've covered just a few time-consuming struggles. What else do you remember? Share in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.